Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, and perhaps even good evening. Thank you so much for dropping by and joining me for another super exciting session of the Daz Plus Pro Artist series that used to be in the studio with Daz 3D. Wonderful to see you all. Mo is here. The Dragonate is here. Jeff is here. I'm wonderful to see you. Amaranth, Anita, thank you so much for dropping by. Enjoy the Tomorrowland live stream. Super nice to have you, even though you're only here 50%. Totally cool. X201 is here. The Jeff is here. The Dan is here. The Web Soul is here. And so many other people like Brian, for example, and Julia. Good to see you all. Anyone else who's out there watching, thank you. All the same. Totally fine. Today, we're going to have a really exciting topic, which has to do with the brand new updated Daz Bridges that allow us to bring content from Daz Studio out into other engines. And today I'm going to be talking about the Unreal Engine and Blender, what the workflow is, what the philosophy behind it is, how to make it work, and how to make some really cool stuff. And I'm really looking forward to sharing this with you all. Leo, David, good to see you all. Let me show you a little bit of what we're doing today. So this is Unreal Engine. And it's not going to be an Unreal Engine tutorial as such. We're very much focusing on getting content into these engines. But this is something that we're going to be making in literally in minutes. It's going to be really funky. This is, I think, Olivia. Probably Olivia 9. We have the Necromancer here, a little bit of poke through on his thighs. I'll show you how to fix that with Blender, and we can make him into a playable, walk aroundable, is that a word? Character. And this is the Necromancer's 8.1. These are, I think this is Nathan. Is it Nathan? I forgot who that is. Well, we're gonna have a look. This is an 8.1 character. She's a Genesis 9 character, and this is just a static pose with an expression. Very cool. This is Wolfgang. Now I remember Wolfgang, that gammy eye, that's Wolfgang. And this is of course the Necromancer. So I'll show you how to get this set up and how to update things, how to make still images, but also how to apply little animations and how to turn Daz characters into playable characters. In addition, I'll also show you how to install the bridges, and I think that's probably a really good way to start there. So I hope you're going to be really excited about this. So we're going to build something a bit like that, and perhaps even wander around something like an environment. So they've made such a big deal about it because the bridges have just been updated, and I'm just going to go and start with a little cube here, and I wanted to show you what you need to look out for just in case you've already installed an earlier version of the bridge. Let me just go and close that down. There we go. If this is the thing that we want to export, what you do is you select it here in the Daz Studio Scene tab, and then you head over here to File, and then Send To, and this is where you find the bridges, Daz to Blender and Daz to Unreal. So either one of them will come up with this this menu here, and if you have an earlier version of the bridge installed and this doesn't read Daz to whatever bridge 2023 version 0.1 right now, then you need to uninstall what you have and delete it and re-download it with Install Manager to get absolutely the latest version. So just historically, the bridges, all of these bridges, they were all separate projects at one point, and hence they were made by different developers, and everyone was kind of doing a bit of glue work to get things out of Daz Studio and then into the target application. But about a year ago, work has been done to make this easier. So all bridges will need to get content out of Daz Studio. So that's basically the same code, and that's been greatly amalgamated. And thank you so much for Daniel and David from the Bridges team. Daniel and I had a really long, nice chat this week, and he's taught me so much stuff that I hope I can pass on. So if yours doesn't read this, if it doesn't have the logo, if it reads something else here, go ahead and uninstall it and reinstall it. On this note, let me just go and quickly do this on a totally fresh system. I'm going to remote log in there just so that we can see what happens. So after installation, there's some things that should pop up in your version of Daz Studio, and I'll show you how this works. So this is a different system, not the one I'm going to demo this on. This is like one that doesn't have the bridges installed. If you open Install Manager and then type in Daz 2 at the top here, then you'll see all these bridges. I don't know about the Max bridge, the Cinema 4D bridge, the Maya bridge, and the Unity bridge. I haven't tried them out because I'm not into these applications at the moment. Time is limited, as you can imagine. So I only know the Daz to Unreal and the Daz to Blender bridge. So typically when Install Manager wants to install something that integrates with other apps, back in the day you had to go up into this little gear icon here, head over to Advanced Settings, and under Applications you would have to add the path to your application, and if there was a mismatch, then there's a good chance that things don't work out. So ZBrush and Hexagon are good examples for that. So those bridges, they still work like that. You have to still give it that target path here for a particular application. But for the new bridges, that is no longer necessary. So even if you have them installed here, if you have entries in here that show Install Manager where Blender is or where Unreal Engine is, you don't have to remove them. But if you don't have them in here, don't worry about putting them in, because the bridge is going to take care of that. So let me just go with nothing else open here. So Daz Studio is closed, Unreal Engine is closed, Blender is closed. I'm going to go and install these two, like Daz to Unreal, this one here, Start Queue, and then it goes and gets downloaded. I'll have to say yes. It goes briefly into ready to install, and eventually it's installed. Now here's the thing, if you have an older version of the bridge and you wanted to uninstall that, you typically, do the same thing, go to installed, have a look at Daz 2, and then you go click this and hit uninstall. What this sometimes does is that this file, well, this package rather, will show up back in here from where you can just install it again. But don't do that. Make sure if that happens, if it's in ready to install, go delete it here on the three little dots icon. There's going to be a delete option, and then go download yourself a fresh copy. So that's really important to do that. I'm going to do that with Daz to the Blender as well. Good stuff. And that is that. So what should happen now, and I'm making such a big deal of it because I want you to get the same convenience out of it that I've gotten out of it. What happens now is that when you go and open Daz Studio, you should see a dialog that informs you. Might have opened the wrong version here, so bear with me. I might have might need to open the other version. Sorry. There should be a dialog that comes up that says, hey, you've got new bridges installed. Yeah, okay, let me just go and pretend that never happened. And let's go and install, let's go and launch this one here. This is the, yeah, perfect. Yeah, perfect. This is the release version. So there we go. Do you know what? Daz Central, this is a good point, X201. Daz Central has actually been discontinued officially. There's been some internal discussions. It would have cost too much development work to keep both applications running, so the focus is now on Install Manager. And Daz Central, even though it still exists and you can still download it, there's no more work being done on it. This is that dialog that I wanted to tell you about that should come up when you install the brand new bridges, and it tells you basic usage instructions and also how to use this thing. So I'm going to go and tell you this, but that's a new thing. So once the bridges are installed, this should come up. You can close it, you can read it, and here it is. That's the bridge menu, from where you need to do a second step. So depending on which bridge you want to use, in my case, I've used Daz to Unreal here. So the thing that you need to do now is install some files on the target application. And we're going to do this for real on my other project. You need to do this for each bridge that you use. For Daz to Unreal, you click these advanced options here, and then you pick the Unreal Engine version that you're currently using. And once you do that, you hit Install Plugin, and that opens up a browser that lets you go and navigate either towards your Unreal Engine installed directory where the engine lives, or you can also browse to an actual project directory, so the files will only be installed in that particular project. So we'll go through that in a moment. I'm going to go and hit cancel here and hit cancel here, and do the same for the Blender bridge. So this is something else. If you're using the Daz to Blender bridge, file sent to Daz to Blender, and the similar dialog comes up. Is actually different because it's a different bridge. It looks very similar, and you need to do the same thing here. Enable advanced settings, and it should be open by default when you run this for the first time. And here you need to go and pick the correct Blender version, and then hit Install Plugin. And what this will do, particularly with the Blender bridge, is that it will find all the installations of Blender that you have and puts the files, the bridge files, into there. So in my case, I have multiple versions installed, and it will go and hunt them out and patch the right files into there automatically. So that's really good. We don't need to find those things manually anymore. It will now hunt them out for itself. So very cool. That is that's something to get the bridges going. That's important to know about. And now that we do know that and have it all installed, let me go back to my main system and show you how this works. I thought maybe we're going to go and start a victory for common sense. That's totally correct. Yes, absolutely. Maybe we'll start with a bit of Blender, because the other thing I wanted to tell you about is there's a bit of philosophy behind what the bridges can do and what they can't do and how they're meant to be used. So I'll open Blender, I'll open Daz Studio, and let's go and see if we can send over some stuff. In preparation here, I'm just going to go and hit A in Blender and hit X so that I remove everything that's currently in my scene. So the plugin at this point for Blender should be enabled already. If you type N, that brings up the tool shelf here, N on the keypad. Then you should have this little tab that's called Daz to Blender. That should be enabled here. If you don't see that for some reason, head over to Edit Preferences, and then under the add-ons, you can search for Daz, and then you should see the Import Export Daz to Blender. So that just needs to be enabled. That needs to have that little tick box, and then it'll work. I don't think there's a need to restart Blender for this, although it can't hurt. One of those things. Let's go into Daz Studio. Shall we try to send the cube over? That's going to be seriously boring, but we can try it out. Let's just try it out just for giggles. So with the object that you want to send over selected here, head over to File, Send to, and in my case it'll be Daz to Blender. And now we have these options here that make more sense as we talk about it. Asset type is whatever this thing is. It's automatically detected that this wasn't indeed a static mesh, but a character, for example, would be a skeletal mesh. So you can always tell by the icon that you see here. If it's like this little cube icon, that is classed as a static mesh, so it doesn't have rigging. That's what that means. But if it has this little disclosure triangle, like on the Genesis figure, what you can open, that is a skeletal mesh, and you'd have to go and pick this. So static mesh will work fine. There's advanced settings here. We don't need to worry about that for now. All you need to do is hit over, well, you can give it a name here if you like. It typically takes the same name from either from the object that's selected or from the scene that you currently got going. Hit accept, and that is that part done. In Blender, you have to do one manual import step, but it's all on that on that little Daz to Blender tab. It's up here. You can either import a new Genesis figure, and this is slightly confusing because it's not just for Genesis figures, it's also for other skeletal meshes. Like if you had a house that happens to be rigged, then you also need to click this. So if it was a skeletal mesh that you sent over, you need to click this button. If you had a static mesh or a group of static meshes, you need to click this, import new env prop. And once again, this is a Blender thing. If you click this once, it actually comes up with a pop-up menu literally on top of where you just were. So you need to click this again, and then the cube will be brought in. Boom. So in an ideal world, this would be much more exciting than the cube, but it's come in and it has the correct dimensions. If you have a look on item, it is actually a 1 meter 100 centimeter cube, so the dimensions are correct, the origin point is correct, and if we had textures on there, they would also be on there now. So just before we move on to something more complicated, what makes exporting content from Daz Studio so unbelievably difficult is the rigging as well as the materials. Probably the materials more than the rigging. And I just wanted to show you how the team have done that with the bridge. So on this object here, I have a material that's got a cryptic name and default, but it has a material and it has a special type of shader on there. Actually, it's two special types of shaders. If you head over to the shading domain or the shading tab here, you can see that they've actually replicated the whole Eevee Uber shader. So all these adjustment bits and pieces, this is a group technically in Blender. If you want tab, I think you open that up, and then you get to see what that actually looks like. Let's not look too closely. It's fine. We let the developers deal with that. So this is the recreation of the Daz Uber shader, at the end of which we get out a cycles output and an Eevee output. So that's what makes this so exciting, because whatever the bridge does to make these material properties work. They will work both in cycles as well as in Eevee. So that's very, very cool. It's very cleverly done, I have to say. And any type of thing you want to pop in here, you can pop in. And if you bring in textures that were plugged into particular input, this is how that gets handled under the hood. So very cool, very clever. Any questions so far? It's good, isn't it? Absolutely, Mo, absolutely. I thought that's really, really cool. Yes, and dear God, indeed. It reminds me a little bit of the shader mixer. If you look at that in Daz Studio, not that you should, but if you can actually get that here under paints in the shader somewhere, shader mixer. Forgot where it is now. Shader mixer, that's the one. This is equally crazy. If you go and import a shader from the item in your current scene, like import from scene, get the material, and then takes a moment, takes another moment. Eventually, you will see it, and it looks scary. So let's not look at that. No, it's scary. Let me go and delete my cube here, and I'll go and export something else to Blender. Perhaps we should start with something like let's go with something like an environment here. I'm going to go and find a house called Grovebrook House. That is a little bit special in that this is an old Predatron asset. Not actually that old, but really, really good. I do like it. Grovebrook that's not the internals, is it? That's not what I meant. Grovebrook House. There we go. That's what I meant. And this is a little special in that it is an environment, but it is also a rigged house. So I'm going to go pick this one here, Grovebrook House. Double click that. It's a good kind of a mansion type thing. Looks really cool. It also comes with interiors, and here this is kind of interesting in that it is rigged. I'm not sure why it's rigged, but sometimes you get props that are rigged, and in that case, even though you in that case, in Blender, you technically have to import a Genesis figure. Just something I wanted to make you aware of. I think there's also internals here. Interiors, is that it? Interiors. Did I do that correct? Yeah, there we go. Now it's got interiors. So the way this works is that whatever item is selected gets sent over to the bridge. So in my case, I'd have to essentially do this twice. Once for the house and once for this group of internal bits and pieces here. Or I can be clever about it and parent this already to the house, like so. So just left click and drag that to one thing that you can select. You can also create a group. That'll also work. And then we should go and say file sent to Daz to Blender. So in my case, it now picks a skeletal mesh because it knows it's rigged. So let's go and let's leave it like that. And Grovebrook House is a good name. Hit accept. Give it a second. Thank you, Brian, for the links. Julia, Dragonade, and Zero Calvin, aka Brian. Those are my moderators today. Say hello to them. They keep me happy. I keep them happy. We keep each other happy and company. And it's wonderful to see you guys so hard at work with links and bits and pieces. I really enjoy that. Let me go and delete that cube and go and you would think now you'd go and import a new env prop, but that's not going to work. We need to import a Genesis figure because we had a rigged item. So let's go and import. Give it a second. Fingers crossed. That is nice of you, Mo. So the import process often takes a little bit of time, so be patient. There's a lot of stuff happening under the hood. For feeding the line, I like it, indeed. And had I picked a slightly smaller item, that might arrive a little bit quicker. So one thing to remember about both these, or basically all these bridges, is they don't do any optimizations under the hood necessarily. So that's important to remember when we come to Unreal Engine and Genesis characters. If you think about a character with, say, 8 texture sets or 8 UDIM tiles, each of which has maybe 3 or 4 maps, that's a lot of textures that get transferred, and they don't get optimized as such. They get transferred as is and they'll work as is, but like especially for game development, that might not be the most optimal way to handle that. So you would have to do that before you send something in. So the philosophy of these bridges is very much that you're not meant to send an item over and then not use Daz Studio anymore. You want to, for what we're doing, you want to use the target application probably for rendering, but the Daz Studio application still for browsing content, loading content, posing your figures, making adjustments to those figures. And when you're happy there, you send the whole thing over into the target app, and then you do faster rendering. But the philosophy is not that you're meant to send all the morphs and all the rigging over and then do all these adjustments inside the target app. Even though you could probably do that, that would be, you have easier tools inside Daz Studio. That's what I'm trying to say. I want to hit N to close this tab down again and have a look at, oh, there we go. That's in the wrong place, isn't it? Now we have these two things in here. I think this should have been a little bit further at the top. Don't really know why that isn't doing that, but it looks a little bit scary when you first see an environment like that in Blender. And these bridges also, they require a little bit of knowledge of the target applications. So in Blender, for example, these things, they're the bones, and if we don't want to see them, and this is especially important with the Genesis character, you can head over here to this icon. If you click that, all the overlays will disappear. Probably not what we want, because now we don't see our floor anymore either. So click that icon, and next to it, this drop down, you can go and disable bones here. And that means everything else will still show up, like the manipulator and all that, but just the bones don't show up anymore. I like to enable statistics because I like to keep an eye on my polygon count. So this is actually a large house with 1.2 million polygons here. That's quite a lot. Seemingly, textures are not here, but lo and behold, that's just because we're in the solid shaded viewport. If we switch that over from here, that's this, solid shaded, this is wireframe here. If we switch to this guy in the middle, that's the viewport shading. That's essentially like an unlit mode for which Blender will have to go and compile the shader. So everyone's favorite pastime. Sometimes you see a message up here that says compiling shaders. Every application needs to do that, especially Unreal Engine. So very clever. The hair and the horror live stream. Let's see how it goes, shall we? I guess it'll depend on the hair, Leo. Let's see what happens. This was probably not a great example because there's so many textures and shaders to compile, so we have to give Blender a little bit of time. But it'll do it, and eventually we'll see all the textures. It brings over basically anything that's plugged into the Iray Uber shader. So normal maps, roughness maps, displacement maps, all types of things. So it pretty much works. It pretty much works. And then when it comes to the character, there's actually something quite cool about poses and Blender that I want to talk about once the environment shows up. So once this has done its thing, you could go into Daz Studio, and why don't we do that, and grab ourselves a character, prepare the character, and send that over next. Let's go do that. While it's compiling shaders, I'm going to go and just start a new scene here. And let's try it with a Genesis 9 figure. Something like, let's start with Nathan. My man Nathan, let's do that. We have a lot of Genesis 9 and 8 and 8.1 characters to choose from. Let's go and start with Nathan 9, not the HD version, just the regular version, and we'll see how that comes across and how we can adjust those types of characters, how we deal with expressions and poses next. So haha. And if you do have any questions, fire away and pepper them at me. If I can, I will answer them. If I miss them, which is also has been known to happen, ask them anyway, and my moderators will be kind enough to put them on a special section on our Discord server where I'm going to have a look if and when I'm waiting for, things to load up like I am now. I have too much content installed. I really need to go through this and speed this all up. It's one of those things. There we go. Nathan, how's it going, buddy? Very good. Very good to see you. Let's go and give him something to wear. Something nice. Perhaps not a dress. That might not be a good look for him. We could just go with something casual. Business casual outfit. Let's do that. King's Guard outfit. Casual outfit. Let's do that. The whole 9 yards. Let's go do that. See what happens. The baking thing, we're going to talk about that later. It has to do with facial expressions. Good question. So the Unreal and Blender bridges, they work a little bit different. Let me see if we can find some hair for him as well. In that, in Blender, you can send over the character in an A pose and then load a pose file directly inside Blender. And it is clever enough to read the contents and turn that into a pose in Blender. That is often faster than applying the pose in Daz Studio first and then sending over a post version. Quite interesting. I don't really know why, but it's, you know, that's just how it works. Perhaps here the Marty Main or the Montreal, what's it? Montreal flip hair. Is that for Genesis 9? It is. Buddy, that's going to look great on you. Awesome. See how that hair comes out. Very interested about that. Hair, right. Is that a good hair color for you as well? Let's say yes. I'm not worried about it. Pixie hair, that's going to look great on him. That's going to look great on him. What I don't see is Blender. What happened to Blender? Did it crash? I think it did. And Blender just said goodbye under the hood. Man, that wasn't supposed to happen. Yeah, Blender just said goodbye. Hey, what a shame. So let me show you this with the character. The demo effect, the live demo effect. These things would be just edited out on recorded videos, you know. Dang, buddy. So anyway, the house, imagine the house is there now. It isn't, but imagine it was. I'll go and press, when you see the cube and all these lights and all that, press A until everything lights up. Press X to delete everything. And now, with Blender open, let's go and notice that everything that we need for Nathan is parented under Nathan, so nothing is outside Nathan aside for my environment options and filament draw options and tone mapper node. So not like, you know, a chain or earrings or something. They're not outside Nathan. Everything is parented to Nathan, and as such that will all be sent over to him. Daz to Blender. Boom. Nathan 9, that's good. Skeletal mesh is also good. Let's go hit accept. It's upset about the cube, Julia. That's exactly what happened. Just like in the olden days, where things just disappear without an error message. It's just what happens, isn't it? Yeah, I think the Grovebrook house was probably a little bit too heavy to do that with. This code here that gets content exported from Daz Studio and then imported into other engines that basically most of the engines, most of the bridges share. That was done by Mr. Daniel Bowie. Round of applause, because that's a really wonderful hard work there. You go import new Genesis figure. That is what we need. Twice. Nathan is probably a lot less heavy than the house, so that should be a little faster. He says. Wow, D4 simulated piece of clothing. I'll see if we have time for that. I'll see if we have time. I did test it. It does actually work, so it's nothing to worry about. Simulate in Daz Studio, pose, simulate, and send over the whole thing, and it'll arrive posed and simulated in Blender. So that does actually work. So once again, if we don't want to see the bones for now, let me go and switch them off. Switch the statistics off. Yeah, that's a little, this is what I said, a little bit less, but not much less. So let's see. So that's my man Nathan. Let's go switch over to the viewport shading here so that we can see some bits and pieces. I think something's gone wrong with the buttons here. It's probably the I should have maybe deforced that garment. We'll do that another time. We have a lot to get through. This is where it actually says it, compiling shader, 67 remaining. So as soon as it's done, we'll get to see him in real time with transparency. I don't know how well you know Blender, but it also has 2 render engines, and we can decide which one we want to preview this at. It's not quite done. Are you done? Are you done? You're done. Perfect. Okay, perfect. That's good. So if we go and zoom in really close, we can see all kinds of skin detail. And this is just flat lighting, so it doesn't have any other lighting. Look at that. And this is still in base res, so all high res textures have come in. If you wanted to add a subdivision surface modifier, you can do that in Blender. And that's that. So all the textures are here. Yeah, buttons, they didn't work, so okay, fine. We'll worry about the buttons later. So, but for now, that's how that works. So if we wanted to apply a pose to my man, then we could either do that here in Daz Studio and then send over a new skeletal mesh, and that'll make him appear as a posed figure there. Or we can pick a pose from here and find out the location of where that is and then apply that one directly inside of Blender. Let me show you how that works. So CDI casual poses for Genesis 9 as an example here. Let's say this one here, standing A pose. So in a normal Daz Studio way, you would just go and apply that, and then notice the time it takes to apply that. A few seconds, but we're here. Now you could go make adjustments, which is cool. And once you've done that with the tools that you have inside Daz Studio, you can do the same thing again, file sent to Daz to Blender. But you can also have a look at where this pose resides. So right click on this and have a look at browse to file location. Make a copy of this whole path at the top and just notice what this is called. So G9B stand A. Let's go do that. And meanwhile, in Blender, on the Daz to Blender tab here, so once again, N to open that up, you can go and import a pose here. When you click that, file browser opens, paste in your path, and see if you can find the pose we were just looking. Stand A, there we go. So that's the DUF file, and that can be read directly with the Magic Bridge. So click that and it's there. Awesome. So it's not entirely correct. So it looks like the hands are a little bit closer together inside of Daz Studio. So it's probably a little bug that the guys are fixing there right now. But so far, so good. We're going to do that with an expression in a minute as well. So those also work up to a point. But yeah, that's nice. I'll talk more about expressions in a moment, because that is a bit of a sore topic. So just because expressions are complicated. So one thing that's awesome about Blender is that you can now go and fix things that need to be fixed. So I'm going to go out of pose mode, switch over to object mode, and then select something like the jacket. So you select these things all separately. This is the body, this is the hair, and all that. So like this elbow is a great example of some poke through happening here. And you know, defaults may have sorted that out. There's also the buttons. Let's ignore the buttons for now. Select the jacket, and then you can either switch over to edit mode and fix this with vertex tools, or you can go over to sculpt mode, make a few small adjustments, like the smooth brush is always a little strong, so 0.3 is good. The regular draw brush, I think 0.3 will sort us right out. F to make that a bit bigger, and just go and, you know, go fix stuff. That was the plan, at least. Was the jacket selected? Yes, it was. Why no work? Dang. Sculpt mode, and yeah, there we go. It's coming. It's coming. It's coming. This might be. It kind of depends on what needs fixing. So either the sculpting tools are your friend, or the vertex selection tools. It kind of depends on what needs to be done. Come on, buddy. Doesn't quite want to do it, but in you know, in theory, that's how that would work. So some more poke through somewhere here now. Oh yeah, like the jacket sleeve here, that's a good example. That kind of goes through itself. So if defaults hadn't sorted that out, then you know, you can go and fix these things. You can also make pose adjustments here. That is a little bit involved, and I don't often deal with this mode. That involves pose mode. So for that, I think you have to go and select the armature. Then you can go over to pose mode, and this is where we now need to see our bones again. Now you can go and select any of these bits and pieces here. Those are all, this is basically the rig. And now you can go and try to make adjustments here. I'm not that comfortable with it at all. So I think what I would probably do is just go and pose the character inside of Daz Studio and then send it over like that. In fact, why don't we do that? Let's go and send the same guy over again. I'm going to go and create a new scene, flatten everything else, double A, X, delete, and I'm going to go and send this guy over also with an expression. Let's see how that works out. So expressions are tricky because they're essentially three things that you need to know about expressions. They can be animated or posed face bones, so anything that's in the upper rig of the head would create the pose by moving facial muscles around. Since 8.1 and with Genesis 9 we have the fax system at work. With Genesis 8 we didn't have that. If it's a bone moved pose, bone per bone, that would be something that's easily translatable. But sometimes what happens is that controllers are used in order to drive multiple bones. So controllers, they look like regular sliders here. Under the head and expressions, let's go and say angry, bereft, flirting, happy, perhaps. Happy is always a good one. Happy, ding. There's no way for me to know what is bone movement and what is a controller, and it looks like the bridges currently don't catch the controllers all that well. So they're still working on it, so this might look a little bit off, but bear with me. File, send to Daz to Blender, and here we now use the same option, the one that that Mo was asking about. It's not actually this one here. It is. Do you want? I'm mixing that up with Unreal Engine. Sorry, forget about that. Let's go and just send it over and see what happens, and see if the expression comes in okay. So again, this could be a little bit off. The third type of expression that you could have, this is my favorite part when the whole figure unravels there. The third type of expression that you could have is a morph. So you could have something that isn't driven by bones at all, and it's basically just a shape that's applied to dial the shape in. Those are the most reliable, and technically they're morph targets, so those will always work. And if you do have trouble getting an expression to work, you can always dial it in, export Nathan out as an OBJ, then dial the expression out, import that as a morph dial with morph loader, and then dial it up, and that will give him the same expression, and that will work when you export it. So facial bones with controllers, they sometimes don't work, and these morphs they do. If we do have time, I'll go into it and I'll share it with you. I'm also planning, because this is just a live demo really, I'm also planning to make shorter videos on how to deal with this, but we're not at that point yet, so bear with me. I was not aware of that, WebSol. If that is the case, that would be great. But I think that the safer option is to convert the whole thing into a morph form, like a morph shape, basically, and then transfer that, because that's baked into the mesh essentially, and we're not dealing with facial bones there. But if you do have a magic setting, do let the bridge developers know. I'm sure I would imagine they would know this, but if they don't, do get in touch. The best place to do that, by the way, is probably David Vothanel's Discord server. He is the original writer of the Daz to Unreal Bridge, and he runs a personal Discord server for mainly the Daz to Unreal Bridge, but there's a section for other bridges, so do bring that to their attention. They're always happy about feedback. Still working on it. Brian, this reminds me of our iClone session when it comes to converting a Daz character into iClone, or character creator for that matter. It just takes a while sometimes. So. Meanwhile, maybe I should start Unreal Engine as we're waiting for this thing to go and do its thing. Oh no, there we go. Just when I said it. You just have to threaten computers sometimes, and all of a sudden, things magically appear. Woohoo! Perfect. I like it. Okay, let me go and bring him in and see how he looks. Daz to Blender, and I'm going to go and right. This is another thing. That's a Blender thing. He still knows that I had a character in here that's called Nathan. So I don't want it to get confused with the previous skeleton. So I can either clear all poses here, or under utilities here, I can remove all Daz. That should technically clean up my scene and take out all the residual stuff. But as you can see, it doesn't completely do that. And that apparently is a Blender thing. So if you do find there's any issues with the rigs and whatnot, don't be afraid to just close Blender down and restart it. And I promise you, the Daz Bridge is actually smoother than this, and it's probably a Blender issue. So double A, X to delete everything, N to open that panel, Daz to Blender, import new Genesis figure. Let's see how this goes and see what the expression looks like. Working hard, I like it. Jeopardy, that would be good, yes. Jeopardy would be great. Okay, there we go. So once again, I'm going to go and take the bones away. The rig, it looks like the hands are still not as close together as they should be. Let me go switch this over to here. Let Blender compile some shaders and see how close the expression is there. So the idea is really you do all your posing work inside Daz Studio, you transfer the mesh, you do another character, you transfer that. Then you send over environments, or you perhaps have other environments for Blender or for Unreal Engine that you want to use as backdrops, and then you go and tell your story, and then you go and do rendering in there. You set up your cameras and your lights in the target application, and then hopefully you'll have a bit of a a bit of a better render. He looks actually happier than he does inside Daz Studio, doesn't he? I like it. Compare that with that. Yeah, he looks a little bit happier. So yeah, the mouth isn't quite there, but trust me, the developers are working on it, and this is with Genesis 9. Genesis 8 and 8.1, they do work largely the same. One item of note, if you now bring in a Genesis 8 character, the rig might be off, so careful with that. Also, if you do want to move the character, what you have to do is you have to go and make sure your bones are showing. Go into the pose mode and click the bottom part here, GX, move that whole character to the side, and then you head out of pose mode, and that will now leave him there. So if I go and send another character, it will be in the middle. So if you don't use the rig to move your character, if you just select the geometry, or try to select everything and move that, weirdly it always snaps back into the root here. So one of those things, it's they're still working on that. So they're still working on that. Let's see what this looks like in a render. So this is just the preview. If I go and put this onto that's the proper light. This is a sunlight, so I might go and just delete that and just bring in just an area light, make that a little larger, move that over here, and GZ that up a bit, probably make that a tiny bit stronger. There we go. This is not great light, but it'll certainly show you the principle. I'll go and add maybe one, again, it's not fantastic, but I'm going to go and grab one point light and just have that GZ up, GX over here a little bit, G Shift Z over to here, and then we're going to maybe make that like 50 watts, and then we've got some light here. Harsh, but it's light, harsh, comma, but it's light. I think that was actually a bit too strong. Let's make that 30. And radius, maybe we'll make that something larger, something like that, so we get softer shadows. Also, if you do render in Eevee, and I don't know how familiar you are with this, so real-time preview, transparency being handled okay, I think. Nothing to complain about. If you do render in Eevee, which is what we're currently doing here, Eevee, you probably want to enable ambient occlusion. That fakes the crevice shadows a little bit better. Then you probably also want to have screen space reflections, for reflections. And of course you can import yourself a HDRI as well. So hey, Not so bad, not so bad. And all the fixing tools at your disposal here with sculpt tools and vertex tools. So anything that you need to fix, you can do it inside Blender. Leo, indeed, good point, good point. Did I do that? I did, didn't I? L wasn't on here. So nope, L's on here. There we go. There we go, exactly, radius. And we can make that larger, and then we have softer shadows. Sweetness. Oh yes, also this is another thing. Let's go and see what this looks like in cycles. This is of course just Eevee. So if I go and switch my Eevee render engine over to cycles, and then in cycles I want to not use CPU, I want to use the GPU. Moments later, things are still being compiled. There we go. Then now we're in cycles, and I didn't have to do a material change. Quite interestingly, some poke through appears in cycles that I didn't see in Eevee. Interesting. Don't know why, but that's an easy fix as well. Do I want to do viewport denoising? Yes, I think I do. It just takes a little while for it to do its thing, and boom. Is that cool or what? I do like it. I do like it. This looks pretty good. That's what I'm thinking. So I have yet to play more with it extensively. I've only just started using this new principle this week and last week. I am working on a commercial project actually that utilizes the Daz to Unreal Bridge to import Daz assets over into a full-length feature movie project for the last couple of months, and that worked really, really well. So for environments, bringing those types of things in that my client had built inside Daz Studio that we now want to render out in Unreal Engine, that worked really well. So this is nice, and characters are always more complex because there's just so much more going on. So yeah, that's the Daz to Blender bridge. So very, very cool. I encourage you to play around with it, and serious massive shout out to the team for having removed all these little barriers to entry. Like I remember having to hunt down locations where things needed to be found and needed to be manually installed, and things weren't working. And you know, they are hard at work on these bridges, and they're getting better all the time. So the plugin, when you go and grab it from Install Manager, that should be currently the working version. For Blender 3.6, oh yeah, that's also something else I need to tell you. Blender 3.5 and previous versions will work, but Blender 3.6 has a new, it's improved its FBX importer so that rigging works better with Blender 3.6. So whatever you use, try to use Blender 3.6. With that said, let me go back to this and maybe save this. Why don't we save this? Let's save it, and then we'll move on to the Daz to Unreal Bridge. Let me go and make a new folder here. Perhaps Daz plus Bridges stream is a good idea. And I'll put another directory here called blend files, and then we go and say this was the Nathan. I didn't know you had a 3D figure of yourself, Nate. That's awesome, isn't it? Let's do Unreal Engine. So we're going to come back to Blender, by the way, because there are things in Blender that I want to use, and I think we could probably utilize Nathan for this. Let's see how Nathan comes out inside Unreal Engine. So what I'm going to do for this is I'm going to go and turn him back into his A pose, and I do that with Edit Figure, Restore Figure Pose here. So that'll retain the Nathan morph and all the accessories, but just put him back in his A pose. Then I'll pour myself a coffee, and then we'll go and see how we start an Unreal Engine project. Shout out to the dev team. I like it, Mo. I like it. 40 times longer. It's also, yeah, you could get blonde hair, you know, Nate. That's not a problem. You could get blonde hair. So with my man here, I might go and save him as well, since we have that exciting directory here. And I'll call this Daz Scenes J Saves, new for 2023. I love it. Bridge test now, that's boring. We're going to call it Nate 9 there. Boom. Okay, so in order for our counterpart files from the bridge to show up inside Unreal Engine, the easiest thing to do is in fact launch it, create a new empty project, and then tell our bridge about that project. So let's go do that. Yeah, Unreal Engine, right. Currently, the latest version of Unreal Engine is 5.2. As I'm recording this video on pretty much the penultimate day in July 2023. While that version is supported, it has major issues when it comes to rigging, and we do not recommend you use it. 5.1 is a very stable version that you can download and run alongside many other versions like I have here, and that is the one that we recommend you use at this point in time because it doesn't have the issue that 5.2 has. 5.3 have released a preview literally 2 days ago. I haven't even looked at that yet. That bug might be fixed in here, but we don't really know yet. It's not a release version, so we recommend staying with 5.1 because that's a very stable version. Let me go and launch it. And then we're going to create ourselves a new third-person project, and then we go and, go with that. You tried 5.2.1 today? Yeah, there are some issues with rigging, especially when it comes to adjusting source and target characters with the retargeter. That is a problem. Skeleton joint issues in the first test. Yeah, try 5.1. That might be the one that solves all your problems, buddy. So games, I'm going to pick a third-person project. I'm going to not use maximum. I'm going to use scalable because I want to give my computer a bit of an easier time. And I'm going to call this one Daz Stream, perhaps. How about Daz Stream 1? Daz Stream 1 is good. Let's do that. Under Unreal testing, I like it. Create. And we don't need any starter content. All I need is the mannequins. And we'll see how it goes. How many of you, maybe it's time for a little poll, Julia, I don't know. Or maybe not. You can just tell me in the chat. How many of you have experience with Unreal Engine as a 3D application? Either as a games developer or just as an ArcViz tool or just as a rendering tool. Little experience, medium experience, massive experience, / making millions on the Unreal Marketplace. Not you, Nate. Maybe it's time you downloaded that. It's a beautiful program. It's also a little bit scary to get started with. I've spent the last 3.5 years learning it, and I'm now at a point where I can actually use some of it. My interface might look a little bit different than yours, but that's mainly these tabs that I've put into different places. I think the details are underneath the outliner, and there's some other non-tabs here that we really don't need, so I just separated them out to give me a little bit more room here and focus on what's really important. I'm going to stick with this level here. This all comes with the third-person project. I'm going to stick with that. There's only one change I'm going to make under Edit Project Settings. And again, this is to give my computer a bit of an easier time. I'm going to search for frame in the project settings, and I'm going to use a fixed frame rate of 30 frames because I really don't need Unreal Engine to render 120 frames and get the fans on. It really isn't what I need right now. So 30 frames is perfectly okay. If your computer still has a hard time navigating around the viewport, you can hit Control-R to disable the real-time light calculation. So that's another nice tip that I wanted to pass on. And it all gives your computer an easier time. If you didn't switch on the engine scalability settings, they're under here, under Settings, Engine Scalability. Mine's on Epic, so I'm going to go and set this to high because that's going to be just fine, and because we've got other applications running. 30 frames fixed and high scalability is fine. Control-R enables and disables the real-time light calculations. That's all I wanted to do here. Technically, I also need to enable the Daz to Unreal plugin, but thankfully the new bridge does this automatically. So all we need is really the location of this project, and then I can go and close this down. Seems counterintuitive, but this is how we work. So now that we've done that, the first thing that I need to do is install the Daz to Unreal companion files into my project. So this is an interesting philosophy, and I wanted to tell you about both approaches. So file sent to Daz to Unreal. This window comes up. Head over to Advanced. And down here, we can see select the Unreal Engine version. Here you can see the companion files version number that is being installed. So this here is the version for the stuff that gets content out of Daz Studio. And this here is the companion version that will deal with the import into Unreal Engine. And that frequently changes here. So here's the thing. pick your Unreal Engine version, 5.1 in my case, and then pick where we want to install that plugin. So Unreal Engine deals with plugins in that they can live in one of two folders. So you can either install it directly in the engine, and then every project that you create has access to those plugins. All you need to do is enable it. Or you can install these files into the project we've just created. And you might think, hey, if I'm doing a lot of Unreal Engine projects with Daz content, perhaps it's better for me to put them in the engine right away, so that if you start 10 projects, you can just click a tick box there and then send over the file. So that's what you could do. But if the version of this plugin changes and you install that to the engine, you risk that past projects stop working because they're making upgrades. And this is the same philosophy that we have inside Unreal Engine. This is the reason why I can install multiple versions side by side, and not like the Adobe apps, they override whatever the latest version is. And that means you can't go back to an older version unless you uninstall the latest version and then instead install an older version, which then causes other issues. So this is the philosophy, is your projects mustn't break, and this is how that's done. So I'm going to go and do this. I'm going to install this plugin into my project and not into my engine. So in that respect, it is here, and I think it's here, and then it's in Daz Stream 1, there we go. That's where it needs to be. So just the top level where you see config, content and all that, that's where those files need to live. Select, takes a moment, and then boom, it says, hey, this has all been installed in that here. If you want to distribute the project later, you also need to install these dependencies here. That's okay, we don't need to deal with that because we're not going to create a game project today, but you can do that, and you need to install these bits and pieces. We're good here. So that is that. Files are installed. Keep it here for a second, and let's go and open the project that I had just patched. These are all my test projects here. I'm going to go and load that, and once it's open, the import of Daz content into Unreal Engine will happen seamlessly and automatically. There we go. Starts right up again. You launch and go to another room to let it go. Wow, yeah, it's Unreal Engine does hog a few resources. Oh my, please save us, USD. Do you know, fun fact, Leo, I had high hopes for USD, and sadly those have been destroyed. USD, I had always assumed that it could do everything, and hence it will be like the ultimate interchange format between applications, and will remove FBX from our wish list for at some point. Sadly, that isn't the case. It doesn't do rigging. You're gonna say, hey, no, Jay, that's incorrect. It does rigging. No, it doesn't. It doesn't do bone structures. It doesn't transfer them, because Pixar, in their infinite wisdom, thought, no, we don't need that. We're just gonna deal with basically vertex positions, and we don't care about rigging because rigging is difficult. Yeah, we know rigging is difficult. That's why we had high hopes for the USD. But yeah, that's not how it works. So that's basically, you would, that's a problem. That's a problem. So, hey, we have Nate 9. That's a good name for him. Skeletal mesh. Advanced settings we're kind of done with here. That is all we need to do to bring Nathan 9 over to Unreal Engine. Let's hit accept and let it rip. See what happens. So as I said before, it leaves all the textures and such as they are. It doesn't do any optimizations. If you do want to distribute a game project, you probably don't want all those assets in your scene. And we're going to try a different character because I really don't like the buttons here. Daz Studio certainly has its place, doesn't it? And again, this is meant to be left open as you work with your characters now. So the import process into Unreal Engine, that takes a little bit of time. So we just let it churn and see if we can turn Nate 9 into a playable character. Well, in a minute. First, we're going to bring in his A pose, and then we're going to go and bring in other poses and expressions, and we'll see what they look like. And we can even dial that up now. in preparation for the next big thing. So maybe something like, maybe not a female pose. We'll stick with these ones, the CDI casual poses. And let's go and let's say we do this one here, stand F. That's nice. Let's go do that. While Unreal Engine is working. That's perfect. So that's that. Any pose adjustments, you can make them here, of course. You can do deforce here. That'll settle the garment if you need to do that. Let's go and add an expression as well. We have the laugh expression. Let's try that. See how that arrives. I don't really know. There's so many expressions, I couldn't test them all. Let's try that. And that looks great. Okay, let's see how we're going over here in Unreal Engine. Still importing, still importing. But it's doing a lot under the hood. I'll talk about materials a little bit. I don't know how familiar you are with materials. It works a little different in Unreal Engine than it does inside Daz Studio. Similar to what happens in Blender, but yet again different. So in Daz Studio, for example, we make a change on the surfaces tab, and that changes our shader pretty much immediately, whether we're in iRay or in filament, and you can see the change immediately. And you can render out your picture, and that's that. Unreal Engine abstracts this process a little bit, or rather the Daz to Unreal plugin does. So Unreal Engine also has this concept of a shader that's applied to a surface zone. But the shader itself, if you make a change to the shader, it takes Unreal Engine a few seconds to make those changes visible in the viewport. So it has to go and recompile the shader, and that's a very expensive process. Not expensive in regards to money, but expensive in computer power. So it'll take like 10 seconds, sometimes longer, to compile a single shader, even though you've only changed a color from blue to green, for example. So for that reason, there is the concept of a material instance, and that is essentially the base shader as we know it already inside Daz Studio and Blender. But we can tell Unreal Engine, hey, instead of making the change on the shader, I would like to create an instance and override some parameters that are declared on the base shader. And when I make a change on the instance, that is visible immediately. So that's something to keep in mind, because we're going to come up against that in dealing with making changes to our, say, skin textures or colors when it comes to dealing with things with materials we've imported from Daz Studio. Nathan was a really heavy character. I didn't remember that to be that long. One of those things. So Unreal Engine can also create instances from existing instances, which is also a concept that Daz to Unreal utilizes. So if we think about shaders as a base material that essentially mimics the Daz Uber shader, and that's an actual shader, an actual material inside inside Unreal Engine. And Nathan's body texture or body shader would be an instance of that base shader, essentially. Or even another instance of that. And to that instance, the textures are applied. And then if you bring in another character, we would have the same relationship. So that's how that works. Just thought I'd let you know. You're totally not heavy, you're right. Yes, me too, Leo, absolutely. I like that as well. At this point, I'm always a little bit worried. Has it actually crashed or whatnot? I don't know. I'm going to go reopen Blender actually in the background, because there is a trick I'd like to show you when it comes to fixing outfits that are already inside Unreal Engine. I'll come to that in a second. That is a good idea. Julia says maybe answer some questions. Thank you. I totally forgot to look at that, and I promised to do it, so it's one of those things. Do X201, do cloth physics get transferred as well, or is it rigid meshes when you bring them into, I suppose, both Unreal Engine as well as the Blender bridge? They both bring in cloth as rigid things. Inside Unreal Engine, you can then go and paint over them to turn them into to cloth dynamics. So that you can do. I don't think we're going to do that today, but it is certainly possible. And then you have, live cloth dynamics inside Unreal Engine. The baking thing I already explained. That has more to do with expressions in a moment. Yes, the hands, Jeff, indeed. Yeah, the hands remain too far apart. Will they come back together when back in Daz? Well, it has to do with the rig and us exporting it into Blender. The developers are aware of it. Genesis 8 characters might behave slightly differently. But it's something they're working on. So eventually it'll be gone. Like the expressions that they're a little bit too much, they're working on that. These things here, don't worry about them. It's just Unreal Engine telling you things. When you open this, you have a new folder that's called Daz to Unreal, and that's kind of a landing folder for everything that comes into your project. In here, we currently have Nathan 9. He has his materials and he has his texture. So obviously there's a difference. Textures are the pictures and materials are the shaders that are applied to his material zones. We have a retargeter asset, we have a physics asset, we have a skeleton, and we have a skeletal mesh. So just for now, let me go and drag Nathan into the scene like so. Hit F to focus in on him. Alt left click and drag in the viewport should move around. And then if I press space, then I go and change my manipulator from, that basically toggles through from moving to rotating to scaling. So let me go and turn you around so we can see your pretty face here. How's it going? So default lighting in Unreal Engine is a little harsh. So you can see shadows and whatnot are very harsh. Let's go and take care of that just before we get going. In the outliner, there's a directional light that is by default set to not have soft shadow. So if you look at the shadow on the ground, it's hard. If we crank up the source angle, then the shadows get a little bit softer, and that makes a difference on what we can see on his face. I don't know what the black thing is here on his face. Let's not worry. The buttons are also not good, but hey, that's Nathan for now. So that is the A-pose character for now. Control-Shift-S will save all these files that have just arrived inside Unreal Engine. Let's go and bring over the pose and expression and see what that looks like and see how you could then go and work with posing these characters. So unlike Blender, you can go and send over multiple single frame poses essentially as animations, and the way we do that is to head over to with character selected file, send to Unreal Engine, and we change from skeletal mesh over to animation. There's also a pose option here, but again, it's one of those things I'm not quite familiar with how Unreal Engine deals with this. There is a concept of a pose object in Unreal Engine. It's not really working for me, but that's because I don't know it all that well. Animation works really well. It's also faster to export. And we need to go and select these sliders here. Use new import. This is an improved version of the importer that doesn't unravel the skeleton, so it's much faster. Then bake. This will catch many of the controllers that make up an expression, and also transfer face bone. So we need those three enabled with animation selected, and also give it a name. So like standing 1 perhaps. That's going to be the name of our pose that we can apply, or our animation. Hit accept. Wait not all that long, he says, and then go back to Unreal Engine and apply that to your current character. There we go, perfect. That should arrive very fast. So there it is, standing is here. So the way this works is if you go and select your Nathan character here, in the details panel, if you scroll down, you've got the materials, you've got the skeletal mesh here, and you have an animation section up here. And currently it's set to use an animation blueprint. We're going to do that in the next step. For now, go and set that over to animation asset. That's the file that we've just brought across. So you select that and then you can pick it from here. So currently we only have one standing animation, and click on that, boom, that is his pose. And the buttons, yeah, they still annoy me, so. But facial expression looks okay. I think the eyes might not look so great. So this is something, you know, on a per expression basis, we're going to try another one, see what that looks like. This may or may not work, but again, they're working on this. And if you don't deal with expressions, you're okay. And there's this trick. I'm hoping I can show you this. If you transfer this into a morph and then apply that and then transfer that, you're going to be golden. Let's try a different expression. And in fact, a different pose altogether. So figure, restore figure pose. Takes a second. We'll use standing 2 now. Whoops, no, not that. We could use that. I was thinking more like this. It's kind of the jacket intersecting with his hand, so let's not worry about that too much. Different outfits react differently. Let me go and try a different expression from the library here, maybe incredulous. That's just one single slider. What does that do? That might be nice. Let's see if that works. It's like, you know, what a pity, Mr. Bond. Let's go send that over. Send to Daz to Unreal. So once again, switch this to animation, because that's what we want to bring across. Incredulous. Is that how you spell that? Something along those lines. Incredulous. There we go. That'll look better. Use new export, bake, and transfer face bones. See how that goes. Possible. Leo, that's a great idea. I had not thought about this, but yes, that is a great idea. Just queue up several poses on your timeline and send that over as a multi-frame animation. That is a very good idea. That is a very good idea. I suppose it's yeah, no, good point. I suppose it's easy to apply these when they're here. So like incredulous is pre-selected. Let's just click on that. It's really easy when they're single frame animations. Yeah, his eyes really don't look right, do they? They don't look right. Let's try a different character in a minute. And the buttons, it's just, you know, the buttons, Jay, the buttons, crazy. Yeah, maybe I've picked 2 really bad expressions. I've picked so many really good ones. And of course, you know, the live demo effect, hey, that didn't quite work. So there. Sometimes it works better than other times, so, you know, keep that in mind. One other thing I wanted to quickly show you, now that we've got that going, we can go and import other characters, and we will do that in a second. I think what I like to do quickly is to show you how we can turn him into our playable character, as it were. So like if I go and press play on my third-person project here, I'm walking around with this character, which is the Quinn mannequin. And I'll quickly show you how to put him into being the playable character, that position. So let's go and do that. It's a little bit abstract inside Unreal Engine in the way how this character is actually driven. So it reacts to what I'm pressing here on my keyboard, and that means it goes and blends the poses or the animations on the fly with the help of an animation blueprint. And it does a great job. Unreal Engine 4 was a little bit more complicated about this, but Unreal Engine 5 has introduced this concept of live retargeting. So that means we can literally parent this guy, hook him up with the special animation blueprint, and then parent him to the working Quinn mannequin or Manny mannequin, and then make that mannequin invisible and have that drive his bone movements. And it's incredibly easy thanks to the way the team have implemented this. So let's go and do this. In our third-person character under blueprints, we have our player character here. This is the file to open. And then, wait a second, and also go and grab this parent that over here, and in here we want to go to the viewport. So this is where the scary magic happens, like on the code section here. This is all the inputs and bits and pieces, so we don't have to deal with that. We're dealing with a viewport in which we can see the mesh. This is the mesh of the female mannequin. So it is driven with an animation blueprint, and it has a special one, which is that. So we need an animation blueprint for our character, and that'll be retargeted from this character. So let's go quickly make that happen. Well, I'm going to go and put this into maybe also into animations. just because it feels like the right place to be. Animation blueprint. There we go. And I'm going to have to pick the skeleton on which Nathan is built. Thankfully, it's also called Nate 9 skeleton, but Genesis 8 is based on these base skeletons here. Mine's called Nate 9, depending on what you named your character in Genesis 9 figures. This is what it's called. Hit create and call it ABP Nathan, perhaps. And then we open it. And this is where the crazy animation blending logic were to happen. Thankfully, we don't really have to worry about this. All we need is we need to give this output pose. This is like what comes out of this thing as an animation, as an on-the-fly made animation. We need to put one node in here. So just left click and drag off that and call it retarget pose from mesh. That's the one. And this node needs something called a retargeter asset that we specify over here. And this is something that comes included with the Daz to Unreal Bridge. And if you click that, it'll show up here. We have one for Genesis 3, one for Genesis 8. That's conveniently named G81 Fix Rot 0 Rot IK Retargeter. Imagine it's called G8 Retargeter. And we have one that's called G9 Retargeter. So this we need to select, but it will only show up when in your content browser or with this little gear icon, you have the engine and plugin content enabled. So I think by default, both of these things are disabled. And at that point, only these three show up. So it's the same in the content browser over here. If you go to settings, then the engine content and plugin content, they need to be enabled. Am I in the way here? Yes, I'm in the way, aren't I? So this is how you do it. Control spacebar to open the content browser, hit settings, and then over here, enable engine content and show plugin content. So that's just what shows up in your content browser. So now I have plugins and engine here, and those things, they need to show up, otherwise that retargeter thing isn't gonna appear in the list. And that's greatly confusing to newcomers. So let's go and add that here, G9 retargeter. And that's all. We can go compile, close this file down. Back in our third person character, I can now go, not swap out this character, that's not going to work, but I'm going to go and add myself another skeletal mesh up here with add. I'm going to search for skeletal mesh, that's the one. And I'm going to call that one Daz Mesh, just so that I remember what that is. I could rename that as well. I'm not going to do that. So Daz Mesh is underneath this. Doesn't matter where exactly it is. I just find it makes more sense if it's here. With Daz Mesh selected, we're going to go and select one over here. Skeletal Mesh asset. That's going to be our Nathan. There he is, Nate 9 skeletal mesh. Let's go do that. And now we see this mixologic experiment of characters in the viewport. That's totally fine. Under animation mode, use animation blueprint, and we're going to pick the one that we've just made, namely ABP Nathan. And now we can see that he is already animating together with the other skeleton. So that's kind of almost what we want, because if we walk around now, we can go and see that we have a mixture of the other mannequin and Nathan at the same time. So now all that remains to be done is make the other skeleton or the other mesh invisible, and then we're off to a good start. Well, it's two things that we need to do. So on our Quinn mesh, let's go and search for VIS visibility, and then go and disable visible. And then that's just him. And you might think this is everything, but it isn't. So we also need to set this to the visibility based anim tick options from always tick pose to always tick pose and refresh bones. Compile, it does that automatically anyway. So you just go and walk around with Nathan. Here he is, man. Woo-hoo. With his buttons all, hovering around. Bad buttons. We're going to go and grab a different character in a moment. You did like the wobbly hair. How exciting. There we go. Also, I think the other thing I can do is just bring that camera. Oops. Bring that camera in just a little bit, because he's a bit too far away. Let's try that. There we go. Now he's a bit, you know, he's more visible here. Excellent. So now he walks around. Now you can also bring in morphs that would then be able to drive the eye blinks and all that. I might show you that, just how to transfer them, not so much how to use them inside Unreal Engine, because that's going to take another hour to do that. So I don't think we have the time. Let's just do this with more characters. Let me show you something with Genesis 9, and aside from the pose inconsistencies, Genesis 8, or rather 8.1, works a little bit differently. So I'll show you something that might be interesting to when it comes to you having to make adjustments, say with Blender. So let's say we save everything and we go back to Daz Studio and we go and create a brand new scene and use a Genesis 8 character, because there's some inconsistencies with what happens with Genesis 8 characters. First of all, expressions work better on 8.1 versus 8.0, and that's only because the team have implemented the fax expressions, and they just look more natural than, you know, before we had them. You get to pick, actually, I have a few 8.1 characters here. And we can also use a Genesis 9 female character in a minute, just before we end here. We can bring in lots of characters. So I'm thinking we can either use, let me just change this to 8.1. Pick any character that you see here. We can have Jazz. We could have Fred. Fred's always funny. We could have the Necromancer. How about Necromancer? Necromancer's good. Or we could have Wolfgang. Either of these guys will work fine. I think actually I want to show you the Necromancer, because he's a kind of a lanky, very different body shape, and his outfit doesn't quite work all that well. You do it with Genesis 8, absolutely. But all these characters are kind of cool. Let me just show you this with the Necromancer, or with Fred perhaps. Any preference? Necromancer? Necromancer. Let's go do that. Necromancer. So the outfit doesn't quite fit him, but I'll show you how to adjust that inside Blender. So imagine you had something that you found, send it from Daz Studio to Unreal Engine, and you think, hey, that outfit doesn't quite fit the way I had imagined it would fit. You can send it from Unreal Engine over to Blender, make the fix, and re-import it into Unreal Engine. You go, fantastic. It's really cool. And I'm going to use an outfit for him that I know isn't going to really work. Hello, Necromancer. How's it going? I'm going to use an outfit that I know isn't really going to work well for him. And that is Space Explorer. All right. No, it's going to be here the Max outfit. Let me go do that. That's the one I've shown you in the beginning. I'm going to go and load the whole outfit on him. We'll see how that goes. So much fun. I might, if you're interested in this, I might next month, here's like the hat is a great example of, hey, that ain't working so well. So really, this is now something I would adjust in directly here before I send it over. But imagine there's an adjustment that you need to make that looked okay in Daz Studio and only looks wonky inside Unreal Engine. So let me go and send it over wonky, literally deliberately. And I'll show you how to deal with that. If it works, fingers crossed. Send to Daz to Unreal. And we're going to call this guy Necromancer 81. It's a skeletal mesh. And if you wanted to send over morphs, you can do that. Export morphs over here. Choose morphs. And then this is a list of all available morphs on your character. So select that. That shows the whole list of bits and pieces that you can send over. So don't select all. God forbid, this is going to take forever to do this. So search for the ones that you need. So let's say I blink, or this case, blink. This I blink, that's probably a controller. And then there's one that's called left and right. So if you select those and then add to export here, it's already in there, then you can say accept. And then with this enabled, these three morphs would appear together with the Necromancer. And you can then go and use them as morph targets inside Unreal Engine. I might not do that just now because it's not easy to drive them. So let's deal with that next time. I'll go send him over. And so this is now a Genesis 9 character as well as an 8.1 character in the same Unreal Engine scene. Yes, Mesh Grabber, very, very good tool by the man Friday. That'll work. Often with these things like the hat, there's probably something in there that lets you make adjustments, like you make the hat wider and taller. I'll show you how to do this in Blender, because that's just another great ace to have up your sleeve if you do need to make adjustments. The hat actually presents another interesting speciality. You know how most clothing items are rigged? In our case, like the jacket has rigging, as we can see here, but the hat, that's just a smart prop. So that is just the regular prop here. And Unreal Engine can handle both just fine. So sometimes smart props, they don't move with the character, with animations. So in that regard, you might have to rig it. But for something like a hat, it's perfect the way it just sits where it sits. It's totally awesome. See what Unreal Engine does when it imports it. Claudia, how's it going? Welcome, welcome. Good to see you. I'm just exporting a Genesis 8.1 character into Unreal Engine with the new Daz Studio Bridges, which is very, very exciting. And there's still very much a very heavy development work in progress. But man, they're now at a point where you can start using them. I felt like for the last year or two, ever since I've started using the bridge, that was, I think, Genesis 3 was around, 8 had just come out, 8.1 wasn't out. There were so many pitfalls and so many things that weren't working, and I'm so pleased that the team have kept working on them. It's just so nice. Here's the Necromancer. Woo-hoo. And his hat, we're going to fix that in a second. Here he is, and also the poke through on his shirt here. But look at that. I mean, you know, if you look closely at the skin detail in real time, I mean, dang, brother, it's looking fine. I'm looking at this in high. I'm not looking at this in epic or cinematic, so that might improve what this looks like. So very cool, and it's still base res. That's probably what you want for a game engine, but you can switch these. You can apply your subdivision surface modifiers inside Unreal Engine as well. You can even bake the high res detail and then send that over. I don't know how well that's being handled, but you know, it does work. It does work. So let's turn him into our player character. Or no, actually, let's bring a pose over first, so I can show you inconsistency number one that you might find both funny and exciting, and also hopefully, you know, how we can fix that. Let me go and have undercover poses here. And let's say this is a good pose for him. I'm going to do a pose and an expression. Like that's awesome, man. It's like the 70s detective here. Nice. Let me go and grab an expression here. Parameters, pose controls, expressions. Just the G81 expressions. Incredulous we just had. Perhaps serious or shock. Shock's good. How dare you not pay the invoice? Yeah, I like it. I like this. This is good. That's good. Let's do that. So, like before, send to Unreal Engine. We're going to switch this over to animation. Make sure new export, bake, and transfer face bones is selected, and call it. What do we say here? Shock. I like it. Hit accept. That's a Starsky and Hutch vibe. This is exactly what I'm getting. It ain't easy being a necromancer. Miss Christina is here. How you doing? Very good to see you. Very good to see you. So, okay, here is the shock pose that's arrived. Here is the necromancer. I suppose we all realized that shock pose can't be applied to Nathan because he is a different skeleton altogether, and this is something that can only work on the necromancer. A quick trick, whatever you've got selected in your content browser, you can just go and apply right here by clicking that little arrow icon. Okay, viewer discretion is advised when I do this, and this happens. Dun dun. Necromancer, buddy, that's not a good look for you. It happens with Genesis 8 and 8.1 characters. It doesn't seem to happen with Genesis 9 characters. And there is a way to fix this. So I know it's a bit crazy. So this is something that you can NFT, of course, and see if that's a new start of your new art series. It has to do with the fact that we need to enable retargeting pose that comes in here. So it has to happen in two places. It has to happen on both the FBX animation, the single frame animation that we have, as well as the Necromancer skeletal mesh, or rather its skeleton. So with him selected, the way to find that out is you can go over to his skeletal mesh asset. You can either click this and then it'll show you where that is in the content browser, or you can just double click this icon. It'll have the same effect, and that'll open his skeletal mesh. So the change that we need to make, and this looks okay here, so I'm not having any problems with that. The change that we need to make is actually happening on the skeleton. So this is the mesh, this is the skeleton that is associated with the mesh. So we need to click this, and it might be called something else. So we have Necromancer 8.1 here, and this is technically a different window, and this is called the Genesis 8 base skeleton. And in here, because the Necromancer differs from the base skeleton, we need to go and click the Manage Retarget Sources up here, add new, and just select our Necromancer here. And that'll have a little message here. Go quickly save that. And this just means Unreal Engine knows what to do with the FBX file in order to correct the issue. So we can go and close this down, and this. This hasn't changed because we need to still change the pose file underneath it as well. So that's, again, same thing here. You can either click this, that gives you that animation, double click that, and that still looks a little bit crazy. So here, with that selected under asset details and animation, retarget source, this is what we need to change to Necromancer 81, and that only appears in the list when you've changed it on the skeleton before. And now this FBX is corrected, and his Necromancer, there we go, and his expression looks perfect. So yeah, that's what we need to do. What doesn't happen is that this doesn't exactly update live in the viewport, but that's just an Unreal Engine thing. So you just either switch to a different pose quickly, or switch from animation asset to blueprint and back to asset, and then the pose is fixed. So yeah, that is a good expression. Just thought I'd let you know that. Let's go and fix the hat before we turn him into the playable character. So this is another thing that is just super, super cool, that we can use Blender to fix things like, poke through here and poke through at the hat area, and stuff that you'll find as you deal with animations more inside Unreal Engine. So that, once again, that happens on the skeletal mesh. So navigate there, and with that item selected here, I'm going to go and Control-Shift-S to just save everything before I break something. With that skeletal mesh selected, right-click on it and choose Open Source Location, just so that we know where that is. And so this is here. Let me go and copy that out here. And I believe the actual mesh is probably this one here, 7:10 p.m. Yeah, that's the one. Let me go and open that directly inside Blender. So once again, double A, X, remove everything, and then go and head over to File, Import FBX. I've got a shortcut here set up because I do that so often. Control F will do the same thing for me. Then we go and paste the path up here. And this is now where we can usually only see one mesh. I would imagine it's this one here, because that's the one that has that. No, this is the one here then. This today 5/29. This is the one. Perfect. So this is the one I need to import. There's a new thing in Blender 3.6 that we need to use, and that is use pre-post rotation. So this is not something that was available in previous versions of Blender, and what that does is that it tells each joint that it has information about each joint's local rotation versus a global rotation, and we need that to make the fix. So make sure that's selected, head over to import FBX and marvel at the unfixed Necromancer. He looks a little crazy with all the bones and all, and we need to do one thing before we can start working on him. That's to fix the bones that are currently not in the correct position. Now, I've seen things when I open FBXs from Unreal Engine exports that aren't even a character, they're just a clump of stuff in the middle of the scene, and that looks terrible. So in order to correct that, head over to Pose Mode, head over to Pose, Clear Transform All, and that'll change the pose. So in our case, the change was minimal, but see how the bone rotations have kind of lined up better. On some meshes, especially non-Daz meshes, that's a much more, much bigger change, like on the Cinti meshes, for example. Shiny, yes. So shiny. Now, we can go and fix things. So first of all, I'm going to go and switch off the bone. So that looks a little better here. And we can also go into, I believe, this mode here. Let him compile some shaders. There we go. That's nice. I'm going to deselect everything and go and fix the hat. So again, some diffuse textures have come through. It's not quite the conversion that we saw with the Daz to Blender bridge, but let me go and select the hat here. And it's kind of your choice how you want to fix something. This is probably good with the sculpting tools. And again, the smoothing brush is a little strong, and the grab brush is also maybe a little strong. Maybe make that a little bigger. Just go and sculpt that in, change that you need. Sculpting tools are your friend, and they're just so good inside Blender. So I'm not gonna correct this here. We're gonna not really see that, but yeah. So that's one change made. Maybe we'll do the same here on the jumper that pokes through. If you want to make these changes and bring them into Daz Studio for fixing meshes, there's always another Man Friday tool that I highly recommend. It's called the OBJ Companion. That is a really funky thing. I think he had also some issues on his trousers here. I don't exactly remember where, but I think just widening this out a little bit is probably gonna be good for us. Yeah, like here, I think that was intersecting a little bit when I saw that. I think on both sides here, makes us a little baggier, and then we're good to go. So the cool thing is, I've made a change. I've sent my mesh into Unreal Engine. Then I discovered, hey, I need to make changes. Then I go and send this to Blender, make my changes. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to export this out and give it again to Unreal Engine to import these corrections. This is so cool. So export FBX once again. I'm going to use my previous directory here, and I'm going to call him Necromancer. I don't know what the other files are, but I'm going to call this one stream update, just so that we know what's what. And here I need to make just two small changes. On the bottom right here, I don't want to transfer the animation, so disable that. And on the armature, make sure that add leaf bones is disabled. That's important, otherwise the import into Unreal Engine isn't going to work. So Necromancer 81 stream update export. And watch this. This is cool. I'm hoping it works. You never know with live demonstrations. So we've got the hat that needed fixing and whatnot. So with the same skeletal mesh, I can go right click and head over to re-import with new file. And that now should be the same location as I had here. Different file size, perfectly fine. For some reason it works. Necromancer stream update. Let's go and open that. Wait a few seconds. Yeah, absolutely. OBJ Companion. It makes it really easy to export multiple items into OBJs, and then you can pick them up with any 3D editor, including Blender, and you can just as easy bring those back as morph sliders at that point. So awesome for fixing clothing in JCMs and stuff in Blender. Very good. And boom, I mean, you know, no error messages, and we have perfectly fitting hat. Is that cool or what? This is just, I'm getting excited about things like that, that just make that, you know, the possibilities, I say the possibilities. So I suppose there are other things that we could do to his outfit, like, you know, we could make his coat waft a little bit, and we'll see if we do that. If we make him a playable character, there's also some things on the back here. So all these things you would make a mental note of, and then just go and fix those in Blender. Let me go and turn him into a playable character now, because of course we want to walk around with the Necromancer, and this is the way to do it with the 8.1 character. So once again, we go to the third person and blueprints here, where we have a BP third person character, which is currently my man Nathan here. And we're going to do exactly the same as what we did with him. We're first going to build an animation blueprint for him, and then we're going to replace his mesh here. I think the mesh we can probably get in already. So Nate 9, we're going to go and replace that with the Necromancer. There we go. Here he is. He doesn't have an animation blueprint yet, so we're going to go and make that under animation. Let's go into animation blueprint. And this time, this skeleton isn't called Necromancer. If we search for that, it's not here. So in this case, we need to use the Genesis 8 base skeleton, this one here, because he's based on that. Hit create. And in that case, I can go ABP G8. And that is the animation blueprint we need to hook in to here. Well, actually, we need to open it and then just give it that one node, which is the retarget node. So right click out of here, type in retarget. I know it's a lot to take in, folks, but it's, you know, it'll grow on you, I promise you. With this, we have a different retargeter asset. This one is called G81 Fix Rot 0 Root IK retargeter at the moment. Unlike the G3 and the G9, it has a bit of a longer name. It's cool. We're going to use this. Just in case you weren't paying attention earlier, or if you've joined us later, for these things to show up on the gear icon, you need to make sure the engine content and plugin content is enabled. Otherwise, those things are just not going to be showing up in the list. That greatly confused me when I got started with this. So that is this. We can go hit compile, close the file, and now we can go and select it from here, ABPG8. And we're almost done. So it doesn't show the updates live here, but the moment I go and play him, everything will work fine. I say everything because there's one thing I do want to change, and this is another Unreal Engine thing. He walks like a girl, and that is because the animations we're using are based on Quinn, and Quinn is the female silver Unreal Engine 5 mannequin. There's another one that's a silver male mannequin, and he's called Manny. And there's used to be UE4 Manny, and there's the UE5 Manny, and they split that up into a male and a female version. So technically, he now has the female animations. And the way this works is that the male skeleton is the base skeleton, and the female skeleton is a child of him. So she inherits everything that the male guy has, but with overridden animations. So if we wanted to grab Manny, and I'm just going to go and make him invisible here, Necromancer, thank you. And I'm going to go to my Unreal Engine mesh and make it visible. So this is Quinn, that's the female version. I'm going to go and turn her into the man. So we do that by skeletal mesh over here. We're not going to use Quinn, we're going to use Manny. And that turns him into the man. And with him, I'm going to use a different animation blueprint class, which is not Quinn, which is also ABP Manny. And now you see he has broad shoulders, so this is now a male animation. So we don't want the Necromancer to walk like a girl, so we're gonna use these. So I'm gonna use I'm gonna make him invisible again, make my Necromancer visible again, and now sometimes we get a preview often we don't, we're okay with it. If we go and play our project, now we have the male animation. So he's got slightly broader shoulders now, and that looks more like a man walking. So just in case you were worrying about that, use the female mannequin with female characters and the male mannequin with the male characters, and then you have a usable, playable character literally within minutes, and that is just so cool. Let me just make one quick change because we have him open in Blender. I'm going to make his code waft out a little bit, and this is probably good to do with vertex tools. So, you know, sculpting tools, you don't have to use just those. So if you select that, switch over, well, we just go into edit mode with tab, switch over to what's it called? Edges, there we go. Alt Z will give you this ghost mode. That's sometimes helpful in case the jacket would be buried inside the geometry. I don't really need it here, but you know, that's something you can do. And then on the bottom here, I might just select just one, switch on proportional editing, and just press G. Oops. Scroll G, and just make sure my selection isn't all that big. I'm just gonna make that kind of waft out a bit like that. Also on the other side, and also on the front. So maybe that you can even go and rotate it a little bit if you want. So subtlety is the name of the game. So we can make these things waft out over here. Kind of like that. So it's just a bit of a flare at the bottom here, and you can probably help that out with more sculpting tools here. If you're not happy with the way this looks here, smooth that out. Maybe grab it out a bit. Hold down Shift to do the smoothing brush here. So like this kink at the bottom here, I'm not entirely sure that's all that natural. And then of course you can use deforce to get that initial drape right. You just don't want this to be draped too skin tight. So this is where good follower clothing might come in handy. Let me just leave it like that. If that's great or not, it's debatable. Let me go and export this out and override our previous file here, stream update. That's perfect. I'll do that. I think, let me just check. Has Blender remembered the two key ingredients here? No animation, and under armature, yeah, we don't want the leaf bolts. That's good. Perfect. Let's go import this again into Unreal Engine under Necromancer, and then we do maybe one female character because we didn't have any women here, and then, you know, we can take it from there. Let's go re-import, because I think repetition and see how to do this is actually, you know, is what really cements it into your brain there. And depending on the complexity of the structure, yes, you're absolutely right. That is so correct. Those buttons here, we should have just not exported them in the beginning. That is it's a very good, very good point. Do I prefer Eevee or Cycles? Do you know what? It really depends on the situation. So I like them both. I do like, there we go, flared out code, and that doesn't look all too bad without cloth dynamics. The armpits, yeah, we need to totally work on that. The crotch, we totally need to work on that. But you get the picture. So the knees, they're not perfect either. There's a bit of stretching going on there, but hey, it works. Would you like to bring in a Genesis, if we're talking about women, would you like to bring in a Genesis 8.1 female or a Genesis 9 female? Do let me know, and we're going to make that happen in the last 5 minutes. Leo, thank you for dropping by. I appreciate that, buddy. This is nice. Oh yeah, one other thing I'm going to show you. If you wanted animated people, like perhaps the necromancer just standing here, we can go and copy our animation, our player character here. Control D does that. And I'm going to call this one BP Necromancer, and he's not going to be our player character now. Let me just go open him up and then get rid of the camera here. And the cool thing is now I can just go and use him as a stand-in figure with the animation. So if I go and pop him here, turn him around, then he also has this pose. And if I go and play with the character now, he has, well, there's two necromancers there. How exciting. This guy is now actually, idling around. So that's cool. You now have two animated characters. It's very cool. WebSoul wants to do G9. Julia needs to do the polls, and sometimes it's difficult. So, no poll. G9. Jeff says G9. WebSoul says G9. Let's do that. Any particular favorite for a Genesis 9 female figure? And I'll just literally do a straight transfer, and then we can see how we can walk around with her. And maybe next month in the next Daz Plus Pro Artist Series stream, we can see how we can do more with animation. So we can see if we can retarget Unreal Engine 4 animations to use with the Unreal Engine 5 skeleton, and hence with our Daz people. That would be cool. Vicky, Vicky, let's do Vicky. I haven't played with Vicky for a while. Let's go load Vicky before Victoria 9. I like it. Figures. So not Olivia, not Olympia, not Ali, not Kiri, not Julia, not Julin, not Carla, not any of these people. We're going to not Josie. We're going to use Vicky. Why not? It's iconic. As it turns out, Jade doesn't actually have it installed. No, there we go. 8.1, 7, 5, 6. We've got them all. Okay. Let's do that. I'm going to go the classique, absolument. Let me go and pour myself another cup of coffee and see if we can get Victoria walking around. Should she wear the classic Genesis 9 summertime bikini, perhaps? Because that fits well. Or should we give her a different bikini? I don't mind. Or a different outfit altogether. Long flowing dresses, that's another thing we can maybe discuss in a future stream, like, cloth dynamics. Let's see. And also, what hair are we going to give her? So there's the animal print go-go suit. That's a possibility. Does that work? What does that look like? Let's have a look. And all in 4 minutes. Uh-oh. Hey, we started 5 minutes late. Maybe we're going to do 5 minutes more. That could be a good outfit for her. It's not the whole outfit, nothing but the outfit, but perhaps with the boots as well. The boots and perhaps pants too. What do you think? Let's give Vicky some pants. This isn't very Victoria, and I haven't tried this out, but hey, variety is the spice of life. Let's do this. Quick hair. Hair that might work. Flux hair, Chanel sweet hair, Voss hair, ultimate buzz cut, Ivar beard, Marty mane. Let me try Voss. I don't know what Voss will look like. Chanel sweet hair, what that's going to look like. That with cloth dynamics, that might be cool. Vicky goes clubbing. All right. Is this going to work? Long hair, that might intersect with the body, but let's try it out. Bob hair, that might actually be better. This would be good to see what the transparency is going to look like. I might make a small change and just curve it out. I'm sure there is a parameter on that. Oh, that's eyes. There's probably kind of a styles thing. Fit for styles and more. So there we go. For ponytail, tail bend. Like something like that. Side size twist. Oh, that's all. There we go. That's what I meant. Oh, tail something. Tail back. That's probably it. That is exactly what I meant. Is there something like a curl? There isn't really that. This is gonna look okay. Oops. Oh, that's nice. That's a good style. Look what you could do with that. Amazing. Tail spread. I think that's what I was looking for, to just reduce that down somewhat. Tail twist. There we go. I think that's what it was. Twist. This is going to look just fine. Just fine. Okay, with 1 minute to go, let's try it out. So send to Daz to Unreal. We're going to use a skeletal mesh. We're going to say Vicky 9. Boom. Come on. No pressure. No pressure. Thank you, Julia. Well spotted. Tail and flip. So funny. This is fun to play with. So if you're not sure about Unreal Engine, this is a great time to start, because you can make use of your Daz content inside a completely different program and get a head start on something that what I didn't do today, sadly. Maybe we can also do that in the next. Maybe we'll just overrun by 20 minutes or so. They are running around in a gray box. I mean, the moment you start bringing in really cool environments from the Unreal Engine marketplace that are available for free once every month, it's going to be just great. Let me go do that. I think importing is happening, even though the project is still actively playing. Dang, I might just do that now while it is thinking about it. This is how you add content from the Unreal Engine marketplace in here. So under marketplace, if ever it switches, you can look for products that you own and then just bring them into library. Actually, you can bring them into a project that you like. So I think mine was something called Bunker. I just wanted to quickly show you. 1.2 gigabytes. Wow. Let's add it to the Daz stream project. Just add that in, and that'll just be an environment. So instead of the gray box and the functionality of it, we can see the characters actually populate a different level. So let's go do that as soon as Unreal Engine is ready. It comes together, doesn't it? A gigabyte, I tell you, a gigabyte isn't what it used to be. Okay, Necromancer, it's time to make room for Victoria. These things, the team are working on suppressing those. At the moment, there's so many of these things that you can just ignore them, but the team are trying to find a way for Unreal Engine to suppress those. So let's see. So first of all, here she is. That's definitely Victoria. And she doesn't have buttons. That's nice. There's something I can show you next time. I've tried some characters, Genesis 9 characters, and the skin, this one looks okay, but sometimes if it's a little oily, there is a way to bump up the roughness value. And I'm not going to do it today, but do remind me next time. I think we're going to do a follow-up session for Unreal Engine on this, and then I'll show you how to tweak materials and add those animations. I think that might be a good idea. Let's go and see if we need a new animation blueprint, or if we can just turn this into, if we can utilize the previous one. That's the wrong one, isn't it? We need this one, third-person player character. So instead of you, we're going to basically have to do the reverse first of all and change, just because I'm a belt and braces kind of guy, I want to go and change the Manny character here back into Quinn. That's the female, and then change that into ABP Quinn as well. There we go. Those are the female animations now. And now I can go and make make that invisible again. And then on my Daz mesh, I'm going to make you visible again. And then instead of the Necromancer, I'm going to go and pick Vicky here Vicky, and then you need probably the Nathan animation blueprint, and we'll see how that works. So this might not work. She may need her own, but let me just see what happens if we... No, look at that, it works. Female animations. We did it in under 4 minutes. Is that impressive or what? Look at that. Hey, no pokes with the hair looks okay. I got, whoops. Yeah, kick that. The hair looks okay. There's multiple Vickies. Hey, this is good. She could be the new Tomb Raider, you know. This is what we're doing, the casting for Tomb Raider. Tomb Raider 2023. Woo, look at her jump. Animated Daz characters inside Unreal Engine. This is cool, isn't it? So one final thing then. One final thing. Just because the gray box is seriously just boring, let me just go and have a look at the bunker level that I've just imported. I think they have a demonstration level here. Save everything. Yes, let's do that. And let's see if Vicky can run around in there. And I'll show you very, very quickly how you can grab still images from Unreal Engine when it comes to rendering these things out, because that's always something, there's multiple ways of doing it. And I'll show you the super simplest way to do that. Would you look at that? That is good. That's a good bunker. See if we can literally just explore it by playing. Whoops. There she goes. I think Unreal Engine is still compiling shaders here, but there we go. Different lighting, different things and stuff. That is very cool. Also, good environment. This one was free. So Epic do that sometimes, that they literally just give you free things and you pick them up for a month and then they remain in your library. I mean, imagine building stories like that. This is just so cool. Absolutely fascinating, isn't it? So you can, you know, this is a little treasure hole chest here, and you can just you can spend even more time with your content than you did before. It's absolutely cool, right, Jeff? Me too. I'm absolutely impressed as well. So I'm glad we did all this. And I know it's a lot to take in, but don't let that discourage you. You can pick this up, and there's not a lot of tutorials out there in regards to using Unreal Engine as a cinematics renderer or just like a third-person exploration thing. Most things are focused on making a game. Let me go and make a duplicate of her, and I'll call this BP Vicky 9. And with this, so all I'm doing there is removing the camera so that this doesn't change what I'm doing on my player character. And it now also means if I had retargeted animations, I can go and use them on her. Like, let's say, there's also, yeah, press the end button to put the figure on the floor. If this was my render, just as an example here. Make her, whoops, make her turn around like so. Frame up something. You can press the G key on the keyboard and then all these icons will disappear if you don't want to see them. If you just want to have a quick render, then you can of course take a screenshot of this, but that's a little lame, and that's also not as good as it could be. So under here, under this hamburger icon up there, you can go and create a high resolution screenshot. And the screen size multiplier set to 1 means this is the screen resolution that you're going to get. You can make it bigger as well. You can just press with this selected, you can press F11 and then it'll be a fully immersive viewport. This option here, high res screenshot, isn't going to take across any of these icons, I think. You just do that. And 2 means you make it twice as big. 4 means you make it 4 times as big. So if you go too high, I think there's a little warning messages that says, you know, your system might crash at any moment. So let me just go and risk it here. Hit capture. Takes a second. And then Unreal Engine kind of renders, well, screen grabs really this and gives you a little location down here of where that is. And when we open that, we can have a quick look at it, and that's the easiest and quickest way to bring Daz characters pose them, put expressions on them, put them in positions, just grab this and that's your render, and tell your story with that really, really quickly. So, you know, very, very cool. We could do this many different ways. You could set up cameras, you could use the movie render queue. That'll give much, much better results, but that's going to take me another 45 minutes to explain, so I thought I'm going to leave that. But we can look into all these things going forward. So yeah, there's no anti-aliasing applied here. There's no depth of field right now. Unreal Engine can't do that with their cinematic cameras, but you know, you can certainly have a much higher resolution exported from Unreal Engine that a regular screenshot would get you. I hope you had a lot of fun with this, and I'm hoping we can return to this hopefully next Saturday. Thank you so much to my moderators who were here helping me. I'm just going to have a very quick look at the questions, if there's anything that I can answer. Would those poke-throughs, says W4N, appear in the final render? It's weird that one viewport renderer has them while the others do not. Yes, that's a very good question. And the reason for that is that usually in Daz Studio, we have this thing called the smoothing modifier applied to things like, you know, have a look at the top here and show you where that is. Mesh smoothing is in fact enabled. And if you look really closely here, if I disable that, this is what the mesh really looks like. But smoothing is something that avoids poke through inside a Daz Studio, but it's a technology that is only available inside Daz Studio. So basically, like, think of it like deforms and HD morphs. Those are things that are proprietary inside Daz Studio, and it's a collision detection essentially. It looks, where's the figure, where's the clothing? Clothing says I have a smoothing modifier, I must not intersect with the figure. So should I do that, I will go and stay out of it. And you know, inside Daz Studio works great, but when you export it, this is disabled, and that is why you see poke through in external applications. That needs to be fixed manually. So if you want to preview, do I likely incur any poke through, go to the item of clothing in question and disable the smoothing modifier and just have a quick look what it looks like without it. So we don't have issues. Oh, we do have issues. Look at that. So this here without smoothing, this is probably what it would look like inside Unreal Engine. With smoothing, not here. And this is why we see that inside external applications and not inside Daz Studio. I hope this makes sense. Animations we've already had. Yes, that's a possibility. Put them all on the timeline, then export the whole thing. Applying them might be a little bit of a problem, but yeah, that's because it's easy to have them compartmentalized in their single file. So that might be something worth your while. Guys, thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to leave you with a bit of walking around with Vicky in Unreal Engine. I wish I could distribute this project. Maybe I'll work on that so we can make playable versions that you can explore on your own. I hope you had fun. I'm going to put chapter points in this session. If you do have questions, pop them in the comments on the stream that you can, of course, watch again and again and again and practice and have a look what you can make with this. I'd love to see what you guys can come up with. Thank you so much. I'll see you next month with more Schnick, Schnack and Shenanigans. Take care, my friends. Bye-bye.